r/AskReddit. What was the most shocking thing you heard the quiet kid say? Nothing. Let me explain. I took a class with Sung Hui Cho, the Virginia Tech shooter, one semester before the shooting. The class was called Contemporary Horror. It was a one-time elective offered by my favorite professor. We read horror novels and watched horror films and discussed the craft of creating scary stories, but also how they reflected or represented their era's fears. It was a great class. There were only about 15 students and it was discussion heavy. Cho was one of them. I honestly never noticed him, even in that small class, until halfway into the semester. He wasn't quiet. He was silent. So on the day we all finally noticed him, our professor asked him something directly, and Cho just stared at him. I can't remember the question, but the nature of it meant silence was potentially an acceptable and funny response. So we all laughed, except Cho. He just kept staring at our professor. Our laughter awkwardly died, and after a few moments of uncomfortable silence, our professor just said, "Ooh, okay," and moved on. It was so strange, but I forgot about that weird moment until after his rampage. That professor later told me that Cho's papers had been disturbing, but the nature of our course meant the envelope was being pushed a bit, and it had never been bad enough to suggest he'd do what he did. That professor was a good man, and he admitted he struggled with not blaming himself on some level for one, not identifying how severe Cho's mental health problems were, and two, for the graphic and terrible nature of some of what we watched in that class, which may have inspired Cho. He knew that was bullshit, but a part of him couldn't help but feel some blame. It was terribly sad. Edit. Added the second para. I was best friends with the quiet kid in middle school. It wasn't so much shocking as the stupidest thing I've heard him say. He got this 1,000-yard stare all of a sudden and just said, "I can't remember what color my dog is." In high school, there was this really quiet girl named Grace. She was a pleasant person, but wouldn't say anything more than hi or sorry unless you asked her something. Even then, she'd appear terrified. It was at prom, and I was in the parking lot of the venue we had prom at. I lost her contact and had to run to my car to grab my glasses. In the parking lot, Grace was smiling and walking from her car. She looked at me, laughed, and said Ryan, her prom date, just fingered the duck out of me. I still laugh about it to this day. 72 virgins is nowhere near enough virgins for eternity. That's like a week's worth of virgins. Playing rugby, hooker fails completely at line out. Someone shouts jokingly, "Does anyone know any good hookers to replace Patrick?" Quietest guy on the team. Never hear him say anything. Maybe Patrick's mum can help. Proceed to fall on floor. Edit. Line out. Line in. It's all the same. So this one kid, who barely ever said 2 words, one day, asks the teacher for the time. It was at some after school thing and there was no clock. The teacher says the classic time for you to get a watch, which for some reason was funny to everyone else. The quiet kid doesn't laugh. He looks the teacher dead in the eyes, and once everyone quieted down, he says, "So are you gonna tell me the duck in time, or what?" We were in like 7th grade. One of my students hardly said a word all year until a couple weeks ago. I was trying to get a group of talkative ones under control and she had enough. She yells out, "Shut the duck up. I am trying to work, you ducking a-holes." Awkward silence followed because I didn't know how to handle the normally studious and quiet one losing it. An annoying friend. Dylan. Quiet kid, you're so ducking stupid sometimes. Dylan. At least I don't suck massive dong all the time. In junior high in the mid-80s, the game Trivial Pursuit was all the rage. We played it in math class one day and this kid, Gary, who never said anything at all, totally spanked everyone else by answering every single sports-related trivia question. He got a lot of attention for it and I believe he walked a little taller after that day. I don't think I ever heard him say anything else, but I did see him sitting on the bleachers at a few sports events. At school, having just shown me the scope for supposedly his sniper rifle. If the fire alarm ever goes off and you can't find me, don't use the doors as an exit. What if we killed everyone with cancer to stop it from spreading? You finally decide to speak and that is what you go with? There was one girl in my school who I've only ever heard speak once the entire time I knew her. It was during lunch, and two black kids got into a fight. I heard her say, under her breath, "Ducking niggers." We were chillin' at a bar in Prague and someone rolled up some hash oil and tobacco and passed it around. The quiet kid hit it and got even quieter. 20 minutes later some aggressive, growling black metal comes on and out of nowhere he yells, "Kill your parents." We duck and lost it. He was pretty happy with himself. The quiet kid from my grade stood up one day, grabbed a broom, stood on a chair and began trying to swat bees that got inside. One bee landed on the window where quiet kid proceeded to yell "Die bee die" and then swatted and shattered the window. He screeched when it happened and then sat back down. Never heard him speak again. Wow, literally this question came at a perfect time. I was just thinking about this and it was by far in sophomore year of high school. This kid was so odd that honestly no one ever really noticed him. But one day he's sitting across from me at a table and he sees this one girl in really tight shorts and goes, "Goddamn, I could have my head up her ass for months." It was pretty shocking. My a-hole is this big while making a circle with her fingers. Edit. Lots have asked how big it was. It was probably the size of a euro. Not too big. Not too small. Just like Goldilocks' a-hole. I'm sure it was just right. And no. Unfortunately I did not check the Olay turd cutter out. I've failed you Reddit. I'm sorry. I feel like an a-hole. About this big. I'll ducking rape you. He said it under his breath when a cute girl walked by. Apparently he had a crush on her. Quiet kid sneezes. Boy behind her. God bless you. Huh? God isn't real. In kindergarten, there was this kid, Donatel, and he never said a word. He was nice enough, played games and everything, but completely silent. One day we were looking out the classroom window as a cop drove by. Donatel opens his mouth and says "police car." At the time, we were all excited to hear him speak, but looking back, that kid must have had some real dark history. This douchebag kid who constantly ducked with people was in line with the quiet kid and the quiet kid's friend. The quiet kid is a bit overweight, so when he gets up to the lunch lady and gets his chicken nuggets, the douchebag says, "You don't want extra nuggets, big guy?" The quiet kid out of nowhere just starts ranting. "No, I am all set, but what are you up to this weekend? You wanna hang out, grab some food, maybe duck a bit? I like to be on top and you look like a bottom. What do you say, wanna duck tonight?" The entire line is dead silent. The douchebag starts getting all pissed off and acting like he's gonna start a fight, and the quiet kid says, "Okay fine, you can be top baby." The douchebag kid leaves to the entire line laughing their asses off at his expense. No idea if the quiet kid was gay or he just knew that even jokingly suggesting the douche kid was a homosexual would upset him more than anything. But I do know he left the line with his delicious chicken nuggets and a huge smile on his face. In middle school, the quiet kid, Steven, had an arch rival, Robbie. In class, Robbie always seemed to come out on top of their little scuffles. Mostly because Steven couldn't really formulate or execute a burn or a comeback. He just rolled over and let Robbie get his insults in until the teacher stepped in. One day I was walking behind Robbie after that class and Steven quietly crept up behind him. Before Robbie could even turn around, he got as close as possible and said, "If I was to come into your house and kill you while you were sleeping, I doubt anyone would even notice." Then he disappeared into the darkness of the science hallway. I don't remember the exact words, but that was pretty damn close. I was about 55% shocked, 30% laughing hysterically on the inside, and 15% terrified. Robbie never made fun of old Stevie again. In class we were studying genetics and one guy was being a real douche and the teacher couldn't get him to shut up. Then after discussing inbreeding and dogs, one quiet kid raises his hand and says, "So is this likely how Peter, douche, became so ducking retarded? I bet your grandmother got raped at Nanking." Jesus. We sat in the classroom in I think 5th grade. My friend had done a PowerPoint presentation about Eminem. He talked about that he lived in a trailer as a young boy, and the quiet, straight A student stands up and says, "Just like you," and asks to use the toilet. No one understood anything of what just happened. We live in North Europe. It's practically no one that lives in a trailer here. My friend didn't. Our quiet kid was Tommy. Tommy never said anything ever. Out of all the lunches we ate at our table senior year, I think Tommy was the only one who never told a story or even added anything to the conversation. He just always sat in the same spot along the wall eating his lunch and laughing occasionally at our jokes. One day we were sitting in the cafeteria eating lunch and sharing stories like we always do. My friend Raymond had spent the previous night with a girl named Haley. She was 2 years younger, but already had a reputation of hooking up with a lot of different guys. So he was telling us everything that went down. Kind of bragging. Even though nobody was really impressed as we were aware of Haley's reputation. Anyways, Raymond gets done telling his story, then proceeds to pull out his sandwich. I think it was some sort of fish. It didn't look very appealing to Raymond or us. So he says this looks disgusting, but I'll give it a try anyways and proceeds to take a bite. In pipes Tommy, "Is that what you said about Haley last night?" Everyone explodes into laughter, drawing the attention of the entire cafeteria. Raymond is just sitting there, mid-bite, stunned. I'm bent over in pain from laughing. Others are on the floor. One guy ran to the bathroom because he thought he was going to puke from laughing. Even Ray had to laugh. I never noticed him laugh, but Tommy had this sly grin on his face the rest of the lunch hour. "Kid, I've never heard you say anything loudly. You need to shout something out." Quiet kid. "What? Kid, shout something." In the middle of a classroom, a full-blown high-pitched roar is heard. Quiet kid. "Christmas." It was a Muslim kid who didn't even celebrate Christmas. What a dude. In class he asked the woman teacher if he could go to the toilet. She sternly replied, "You've got 2 minutes. Richard says, 2 minutes? It takes me that long to unravel it." Teacher goes red and everyone loses it. We were having a bullshit elective course and we ran out of stuff to do, so we wound up having story time. My friend walks up to the front and starts telling us about how he once got pretty badly injured. Basically he was walking into his friend's house, slipped on some black ice, Fassa planted on it and his front teeth tore off most of his front lip and broke off. He ran into the house babbling and bleeding. He was like 11 and was missing part of his face, so he wasn't 100% coherent at the time. And his friend's mom takes one look, runs into her bedroom, locks the door and doesn't do anything until my friend's dad arrives and starts screaming at her. My friend says he still has no idea why the grown adult woman couldn't handle the situation any better, and we all start making guesses and bullshit psychoanalysis. Cue the quiet kid raising his magnificent head and blessing us with enlightenment. Maybe she just needed to finger herself real quick. He started to attack someone in my class with a table when the teacher got a cup of coffee. That was quite something. One thing I always say, as a quiet guy, is whenever people are talking about me within earshot they usually say something like, "That Mixmaster Bone, he just never talks." Then I say, "No, but I hear everything." They all just kind of laugh awkwardly and slither away. I think it's weird how my lack of conversation is such a huge conversation starter. Edit. Spelled my name right. Someone once turned to me and said, "Dude, you're always so quiet, like a serial killer or something." I immediately responded, "Thank you." Looks of shock and horror as I realized what I said. Jeremy. This guy was so silent that we believed he was a mute. The school had just recently painted the bins in all kinds weird styles. As our group was walking somewhere at lunchtime, we passed a bin that was covered in handprints. He offhandedly goes, "That bin is handy," leaving us dumbfounded at his pun bomb. I'm the quiet kid. One day, before my economics class started, this guy turned around in his desk and asked me what I thought he'd be when he grew up. He never took anything seriously and joked around a lot. So I answered, "Definitely a porn star." The girl next to me started laughing really hard, and even when class started, she didn't stop. The teacher walked over to her and asked her what she was laughing about. When she finally calmed down enough to answer, she said, "So Lucifer said that Daniel's gonna be a porn star," and the whole class heard it. Everybody, including my teacher, was staring at me with shocked looks on their faces. I turned bright red and couldn't find any valid excuse for what I'd said, and that's why I never talk. In high school, I had first level Spanish with this kid who was super quiet. At the end of the year, we all had to give a speech in Spanish in front of the entire class. This mother ducker stood up and gave a speech, not in Spanish, but in a language that he had spent the entire year inventing. Fresh and innocent quiet girl on the spikes on top of German helmets from the war. They look like painful butt plugs. I caught him looking at MLP porn on his phone. That was awkward. I went to middle school and high school with this boy named Daniel. Never once heard him say a word. A friend of mine said he would whisper sometimes. The night of our senior party we heard some music coming over from the corner where the karaoke machine was set up. At first no one really noticed him because people had been singing on it all night and most people stopped paying attention. But this was different cause no one was singing and the music was playing. The DJ stopped the music and started the song again. Daniel was standing there looking frightened, but this time around when the song started he began to sing. Everyone in the room stopped what they were doing and just crowded around him. He wasn't a great singer by any means, but 99% of the people in the room hadn't ever heard him talk. When the song was over everyone started clapping and cheering and he walked away with a big smile on his face. I was in marching band in HS, probably 7 years ago now, and we had this huge muscular guy as our brass instructor. He would always yell at us to nail these chords or you're not playing loud enough. There was this little Asian trumpet kid that was so innocent and nice. He barely ever spoke a word. One really hot afternoon, our instructor was being especially loud and said, "Why don't the trumpets blow hard enough?" Dead silence across the field as all the brass are waiting for next instructions. Then we hear, "Why doesn't your mom blow this dong hard enough?" from quiet trumpet kid. Needless to say, we all laughed, got push-ups and laughed some more. Quiet guy I worked with never said much until he came up to me and asked what happens when an Eskimo comes. Before I get the chance to respond he throws a handful of ice at me and walks away. So this isn't so much what he said. The seniors played locker pinball with the underclassmen. It's exactly what it sounds like. They bounced one little guy constantly, made him late for class a lot because they'd keep him bouncing so long. Well, one day they were bouncing him and he super politely said, "Please stop. You're hurting me." Obviously the seniors bounced him harder. Apparently that was this kid's breaking point because he leapt onto the nearest senior. We just happened to be our star basketball forward. The little freshman bit into the senior's neck and literally tore a mouthful of skin off. He just stood there with this piece of bloody skin on his shirt growling at everyone. Needless to say, no one ever ducked with Mad Dog Mike after that. My dad is very quiet, to the point that it makes most people uncomfortable, even me sometimes. One day, we're at the park and a woman walks past us and my dad quickly says, "What if I punched that woman in the face?" and said, "Sorry, I thought you were my wife." I wasn't there, but in my announcing techniques class, teaches you how to present yourself and speak for radio television. We were filming how to videos in the studio, and the professor was telling us past examples of good and bad projects. One in particular was done by a very shy, awkward kid who came to the studio with a friend and a metal box. He so casually proceeds to pull a bunch of knives out of the box and film his video on the best ways to use the knives in combat with very specific and effective ways to kill somebody using his friend as a dummy. He was very volatile with his movements, and his friend apparently didn't even bat an eye. The professor then explained that despite how uncomfortable it made him and the rest of the class, he had to give him an A because his presentation was actually put together pretty well. Whoa, you made it to the end? You're a ducking beast. I'll cut you a deal. Smash like and subscribe for more curated content, bruh. It's free and that's a great price.